Hello there, this is L24 World News and these are your headlines. Kenyan Deputy President William Ruto was declared the winner of presidential election on Monday, but the majority of the commission said that they could not stand by the result, leaving voters confused on the edge in a country with a history of post-election violence. A UN chartered grain ship left Ukraine on Tuesday, with the food eventually bound for Ethiopia. A somber gathering of more than 1,000 marked the 10th anniversary of what has become known as Marikana Massacre, when police opened fire on striking miners, killing 34 in 2012. A year after Kabul's fall and the US withdrawal, the economy remains in free fall, and the country faces a near constant and humanitarian disaster in Afghanistan. Good afternoon, I'm your host Abdurrahim Kashur, and those were today's top stories. First, in our topic on news, the long-awaited results of presidential election in Kenya have been announced on Monday. The result has not seen an absolute agreement by the Kenyan people, as opposition leaders allege that election has seen fraud. Usama Ayadi.
Kenya's Electoral Commission chairman has declared Deputy President William Ruto the winner of the close presidential election over five-time contender Raila Odinga, a triumph for the man who shook up politics by appealing to struggling Kenyans on economic terms and not on traditional ethnic ones.
I, Wafula Chebukati, Chairperson of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, hereby declares that Ruto William Samoei of ID number 6847208 has been duly elected as the president.
Supporters of Deputy President William Ruto celebrated in the streets after the declaration of their candidate as president. Ruto won the electoral race by receiving 50.48% of the vote, while his rival Odinga received 48.85%.
The reason as to why I believe in William Ruto is because he believes in the hustler nation. Hustler nation means everybody in his own hustle, in his own small business. He believes even in the wheelbarrow economy.
The election results of the country have not been as quiet and straight. A number of people did not accept the result of the final phase of election. 4 of the 7 electoral commissioners of Kenya's presidential election stated that they could not support the ambiguous nature of the final phase of the vote verification process.
We are here, not at Bomas of Kenya, where the result is going to be announced, because of the opaque nature of how this phase has been handled.
Opposition leaders and rivals of Ruto explained that their system was penetrated and hacked, and some of the Electoral Commission officials committed electoral offences, and some of them had to have been arrested.
We have intelligence and reports that their system was penetrated and hacked, and that some of the IEBC officials actually committed electoral offences, and some of them ought to have been arrested if they were not arrested.
While Ruto supporters celebrated the win, other supporters of Odinga erupted the streets of the country, showing the wrath and refusal of the results. This triggered riot police forces to fire tear gas to disperse the crowds who blocked the roads with burning tires.
In the same line of thoughts, within the presidential election in Kenya, William Ruto faces major challenges as he prepares to take over the presidency, among them rising inflation, unemployment, and record high levels of public debt. Kenya's tourism sector was particularly hard hit by the pandemic. Both William Ruto and his defeated opponent Raila Odinga promised to tackle widespread corruption, but critics says the roles his previous scandal hit government cast doubt on those pledges. On the top of that, prolonged drought increased the risk of people going hungry. Some of the poorest in Kenya can only afford one meal a day. To a different matter now, the United States Department spokesperson Ned Price told in briefing on Monday that Iran must abandon unnecessary demands if it is to reach a nuclear deal.
We have made very clear that the JCPOA is about one thing and one thing only. It's about Iran's nuclear program, and we are prepared to negotiate one thing and one thing only. We will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. We will use all tools available to deter, to contain, and otherwise counter dangerous Iranian activities in the region, and in some cases, well beyond, not the least of which, as we've all been discussing in recent days, is the plotting against former U.S. officials and other potential threats to American citizens.
Coming back to this nuclear deal, Iran signed the agreement in 2015. It was planned to limit to Tehran nuclear ambitions in exchange for sanctions relief. But in May 2018, then President Donald Trump withdrew the U.S., began reimposing sanctions. A year later, Iran started ramping up its nuclear program. It reduced access to monitors from the UN nuclear watchdog, increasing tension with U.S. Negotiations resumed in April last year under the Biden administration, and the European Union put forward what it called a final text, urging all sides to sign onto a deal. To Ukraine, Russia definitive Ekon, the ship Brave Commander, has left the Ukrainian port on Tuesday carrying the first cargo of humanitarian food aid intended for Africa from Ukraine. The ship's departure has been approved by Russia, Ukraine, the United Nations, as well Turkey. This letter said a total of 5 ships left Ukrainian ports carrying corn and wheat. A UN vessel carrying has been loaded 23,000 tons of grain heading to Ethiopia, Somalia, as well Kenya, as part of UN-backed plan to relieve a global food crisis and move the grain trapped in the Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Somali government also received 40 containers of food aid from the United Arab Emirates Saturday.
I want to thank the Minister and the Office of the Prime Minister for attending the handover of humanitarian assistance sent by the government of the United Arab Emirates. We're handing over 1,000 tons of aid for the Somali government. You know that earlier this year, the UAE donated $9.5 million to the Somali government.
As fears mount of a possible accident at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the United Nations said it had the logistics security capacity to support a visit by International Atomic Energy Agency to inspect the facility with the consent of both Russia and Ukraine. Nabil Khazini tackled the story in this report.
It is now in the heart of the conflict in Ukraine, and also in the heart of global concerns of a possible nuclear catastrophe. The specter of an atomic disaster in Europe pushed the United Nations to declare that it has the logistics and security capabilities to support a visit by inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, only if Moscow and Kiev reach an agreement.
First, the IAEA is a specialized agency that acts in full independence in deciding how to implement its specific mandate. Second, the UN Secretariat has no authority to either block or cancel any IAEA activities.
The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, accusing Russia of blackmailing actions around the nuclear facility, urged the world to intervene to prevent what he says the consequences affecting those remaining silent.
The world has been fighting for many decades for proper control over all activities with nuclear materials and radiation safety. And if now the world lacks the strength and determination to protect one nuclear plant, it means that the world will lose.
In a related context, the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu reassured on Russian intentions in the nuclear field, saying that it is not necessary to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine to achieve the objectives set by Moscow.
Speculation is spreading in the media about the alleged preparations for the use of Russian nuclear weapons in the special military operation or the willingness to use chemical weapons. All these media canards are lies.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres previously called for an end to military activities around the Zaporizhia nuclear complex, as Moscow and Kiev accused each other of bombing the area.
Russian President Vladimir Putin accuses the United States of dragging out the Ukraine conflict and seeking to destabilize the world with the recent visit to Taiwan by Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi.
The situation in Ukraine shows that the United States is seeking to drag out this conflict, and it is doing the same by instigating the potential for conflict in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. As we know, the United States has recently once again made a deliberate attempt to add fuel to the fire and sway the situation in the Asia-Pacific region.
The Ukrainian military stated that it has stopped more than a dozen Russian attacks in the country's east and north, including attempts to advance on key cities in the eastern industrial heartland known as the Donbas region. Ukraine's military said that Russian troops had attempted to push towards Kramatorsk, one of two major cities in the eastern Donetsk province that remain under Ukrainian control, but they failed completely and confusedly retreated to the previous positions. A delegation of ambassadors from the European Union countries arrived this morning in Gaza Strip through the Beit Hanun crossing on a visit that lasts for several hours with the aim of reviewing the humanitarian and health conditions in the Strip. It is scheduled, according to media, that an agreement will be signed between the European Union and the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in Gaza. And the delegation will conduct an inspection tour of a Shifa hospital in Gaza to see the health conditions in the Strip, and then a press conference will be held in the same place. A decade on since 34 striking miners in South Africa's Marikana town were killed by police, relatives of the victims still seek answers for those accountable of the massacre. In August 2012, 3,000 of 28,000 miners at a platinum mining site near Rustenburg went on strike over wage issues. The strike led to clashes with police and left 34 miners dead. China's military carried out more exercises near Taiwan as a group of U.S. lawmakers visited the Chinese-claimed island and met President Tsai Ing-wen in what Beijing considered an infringement of its sovereignty. The 5 U.S. lawmakers, led by Senator Ed Markey, arrived in Taipei on an unannounced visit late on Sunday, the second high-level group to visit following the U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
U.S. Senator Markey and his entourage insisted on visiting the Chinese region of Taiwan in defiance of China's solemn representations and firm opposition, thereby blatantly violating the One China principle and the provisions of the 3 communiques, Sino-American joint ventures violating China's sovereignty and territorial integrity and sending the wrong signal to separatist forces in Taiwan.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said that China has warned Taiwan authorities that any attempt to seek independence by colluding with external forces is doomed to fail and will push Taiwan into the abyss of disaster. This comes as a response to the Taiwan authorities' claim that Chinese mainland was trying to establish a new normal and intimidate region. In the same context, Beijing has said it is blacklisting 7 Taiwan officials over their alleged support for the self-ruled island independence. A Chinese survey vessel docked at Sri Lanka's port of Hambantota. This act raised concerns in neighboring India about the growing influence of China, as India fears its bigger and more powerful rival could use the port near the main Asia-Europe shipping route as a military base. To a different matter now, since Taliban took rule over Afghanistan last year, numerous changes occurred in the country, which is facing multiple challenges that demand immediate global attention in the country. Islam Seed.
Victory parades filled the streets of Kabul as Taliban celebrated 1 year in power. Taliban supporters and officials gathered in front of the U.S. Embassy to mark the day. In a ceremony attended by Taliban government ministers, Acting Foreign Minister Amin Khan Muttaqi said their rule had brought security, and the group wanted positive relationships with the world.
We tell the world that the stability and security in Afghanistan is beneficial for the entire world. Instability in Afghanistan is never beneficial for the world. We want positive and good connections with the world. Afghanistan's soil won't be used against anyone, and we are keen on that.
Afghanistan's economy is put under huge pressure. Poverty line has increased. Food crisis and drought made it worse. These are among the challenges that face Taliban to lead the country to safer ground. The Red Cross on Monday appealed to states and donors to set aside their political objections and resume aid flows to Afghanistan's state institutions in order to ease an unbearable humanitarian situation there.
Humanitarian organizations alone cannot replace public institutions of a country of 40 million people. So we really urge states and development agencies to return to Afghanistan, to support Afghans who continue to bear the brunt of economic turmoil, drought, and the fallout of decades of.
Both UN officials and China's special envoy to Afghanistan called for lifting the sanctions against the country and unfreeze its seized assets, including $9 billion held overseas.
From our sides, again, UN has been very clear about this issue. Definitely injection of cash into the economy and injection of financial resources into the economy of the country will cause a positive humanitarian outcomes, because the restoration of an economic activity will be very important for the country to recover and to create a condition that the people can feed themselves.
So one thing we still urge United States to show their major and primary responsibility of Afghanistan's peace, stability, and reconstruction. And also we urge upon United States to unfreeze the assets of Afghan people.
The economic slump in Afghanistan has driven millions of Afghans to plunge into a humanitarian crisis due to the slow flow of foreign aid as the country is put into isolation from the world.
Heavy rains set off flash floods that killed at least 31 people and left dozens missing in northern Afghanistan. The flooding took place on Sunday in northern Parwan province. Reports announced that women and children were among the dead and 17 people were reported injured. The government of Armenia will declare a national day of mourning in commemoration of those who lost their lives in the August 14 explosion at Soramala market in Yerevan. The Prime Minister's office stated that the exact date of the day of mourning will be announced after search and rescue operations are completed. The death toll of the blast can climb to 16 and another 18 are missing as of Tuesday morning, in addition to 12 people who remain hospitalized. An urgent meeting of the International Union of Muslim Scholars will be held today regarding the latest statements of its president Ahmed Raisuni, who attacked Algeria ruling in a television interview. And in a clarification for the International Union of Muslim Scholars published on its official website, states the Constitution of the International Union of Scholars stipulates that the opinion it is assigned to a union is the opinion that is agreed upon. Based on this principle, the interviews or articles of the President or the Secretary General express the opinion of the author only, but not the whole union. The Algerian Movement of Society for Peace stated that Al-Risuni bears responsibility for consequences of his statements within the tense international and regional circumstances that do not bear such events that inflame the fires of treason. 9 years after Paris dispatched soldiers to the West African nation to assist in ousting Islamic activists from power, the last French army unit left Mali on Monday, according to a statement from the French military. France's armed forces completed their withdrawal from Mali 6 months after French President Emmanuel Macron announced his plan to pull out all the French soldiers from the country following tensions with the ruling junta. A court in Myanmar has convicted the deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi on charges of corruption, adding 6 years to her prison sentence. According to a legal official, she had already been sentenced to 11 years in prison on sedition, corruption, and other charges at earlier trial, after the military detained her in February 2021 as if it seized power from her elected government in February 2021 coup. Hundreds of coca growers from Bolivia's Las Paz department marched again on Monday, demanding the closure of parallel markets promoted by a group affiliated to the ruling movement of socialism, while residents set up barriers to protect their homes. Men and women of the coca growers associated, headed by Freddy Makikado, began the march after noon from Calais 10 of Valley Al Carmen to Cali 1, where the parallel market is located. The market was set up last year and is managed by Arnold Alanas.
As Coca-Cola producers from the young gas sector, we are used to these kinds of actions from the government. The government is creating these situations. We recognized laws passed by the MAS government that only recognized 2 markets in the country. But now, in the face of the authorities, they are creating a 3rd and 4th markets. We ask for them to be closed because it endangers our economy.
And with this protest news, we go back to our news headlines. Kenyan Deputy President William Ruto was declared the winner of presidential election on Monday, but the majority of the commission said that they could not stand by the result, leaving voters confused on the edge in a country with a history of post-election violence. A UN-chartered grain ship left Ukraine on Tuesday, with the food eventually bound for Ethiopia. A somber gathering of more than 1,000 marked the 10th anniversary of what has become known as Marikana Massacre, when police opened fire on striking miners, killing 34 in 2012. A year after Kabul's fall and the U.S. withdrawal, the economy remains in free fall, and the country faces a near constant and humanitarian disaster in Afghanistan. That's all what we have for now. For more updates, you can follow our pages on Facebook, YouTube, as well as Instagram. Bye-bye for now.